Okay, so when we talk about Buddhism, if you remember the Karen Armstrong video where she talks about religion shouldn't be defined so much on beliefs, on kind of metaphysical claims. And I've mentioned that she takes very much a Buddhist approach. However, to be fair, that even Buddhists have a metaphysical foundation. They have metaphysical underpinnings. It's undeniable. You can't have a system of belief, a religious practice, without some foundational understanding of the world. I think what she's going for, we'll talk about more at the end of this presentation, but there is a metaphysical foundation. What is the nature of the world? If the teachings of the Buddha are Dharma, Dharma being the way the world is, and they're embodied in the teachings of the Buddha, what is essential? What is foundational to those teachings? And foundational are the three marks of existence. We'll also get into the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. But, there were the three jewels we talked about, the things that guide one, in essence, to enlightenment. That's the Buddha himself, the Sangha. So we had those three. The Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha. Well, part of the teachings are the three marks of existence. So what are they? Well, the three marks of existence are impermanence. The nature of life is such that nothing is permanent. Anicca is the term. The second is suffering. Life is suffering. If you think of nothing else, I should have a picture of him if you've watched The Princess Bride, right? Wesley, when he's disguised as the Dread Pirate Roberts in the Black Mask, and he says, life is pain, right? That's a very Buddhist statement. Life is suffering. That's simply the nature of life. If you watched the documentary, or I mentioned in passing in the previous short lecture that part of the Buddha's experience was the four passing sights, right, of old age, of sickness, of death, and the renunciate, the monk, the ascetic. So these are the first impermanence. Nothing is permanent, nothing lasts. Suffering, dukkha, and then the absence of soul, or the absence of a self. It's interesting. There's actually a philosophical comic strip that looks at that has Buddha and David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, from the 18th century, sitting together talking, and they're both discussing how much they agree on the lack of a self. There's just this collection of experiences. There is no real self. Like, is your 2-year-old self the same thing as your 20-year-old self? How could you say those are the same being, even? There's just this long string of immediacies and experiences. There's no unified soul that we can find anywhere. So he's rejecting, in a sense, the jiva of at the very least, the jiva of Hinduism, right? That personal soul that is attached to karma, that travels through time and lifetimes, and experiences payment and reward for karma. He's at least rejecting that, and certain interpretations of the Buddha. He may be rejecting the Atman, the idea of the connection to the ultimate self. There's some expressions about nirvana may not be a total rejection of that, but there is definitely this absence of self, absence of soul, that is part of the three marks of existence. So in essence, the idea that anything is permanent, the idea that you have a soul, the kind of the spending of life on pleasures, all these things they're maya, they're illusion, they're not real. And so a lot of Buddhism, notice this, that the three marks of existence in Buddhism are sort of negations. This is important to keep in mind as you look at Buddhism and try to come to understand it. So Buddhism does have, for its differences with Hinduism, it does have a law of karma. stated that every cause has an effect, our actions have results. In Buddhism, like in Hinduism, this explains a number of things. Inequality in the world, why some are born handicapped and some gifted, why some live only a short life. Why did you have such a hard time? Well, it's karma from your previous life. But karma is also more impactful in the immediate life in Buddhism sometimes than it's seen in Hinduism. And it really it underlines the importance of all individuals being responsible for both past and present actions. Important to karma in Buddhism is not caste, but intention behind the action, the effects of the action on oneself, and the effects on others. So there's a certain kind of consequentialist view, though consequentialism in line with motives. You need proper motivation, and you need to look for proper consequences to these acts, right? This is part of the ethic behind Buddhism. And karma is an overarching law. Now, there is no jiva in Buddhism for karma to be attached to. So in some odd sense, your karma is all that carries on from one lifetime to the next, because you have no soul. This is one of the difficulties of understanding Buddhism, is that there is a sense of reincarnation, but what is it that's reincarnated? There's not a lot of explanation of that. It's your karma that carries on to the next life. And how that works is rather challenging to understand. There are general standards of morality for everyone. There are precepts, the sila, virtuous behavior, morality, or precepts. You need to action has to do with thought, word, and deed, not just your actions and not just your intentions, but all together. It is rooted in intentional effort. These standards of morality help lead to purity, peace of mind, peace with others, and helps prevent bad karma or bad rebirths. They're general commands: non-violent, moderate, compassionate to all beings. There are 5 precepts: no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants. So these are pretty standard to many religions. You'll find similarities to other religious practices in this. So this idea of respect for life, respect for others' property, respect for our bodily nature, respect for the concept of truth in language, and respect for the mind, keeping a clear mind. Monks have other standards. They shouldn't dance or engage in music or singing or shows. Now, this is going to vary, honestly. There's a tremendous degree of variation in the different expressions of Buddhism. So you have this rule about no dancing, yet you'll see in a video a monk, a woman who teaches young girls to sing, and she's a singing monk. So even with these novice monks, these added standards, you're going to find differences from community to community. You're not supposed to accept money in some, but in some they beg and accept money. So but there are various rules, and then they'll vary from monastic group to monastic group, and from expression within Buddhism. We'll have the different schools. We'll talk about that some. But there are these. The 5 basic rules are for everyone. Within monastic communities, you're going to find other rules of life, monastic rules of action and meditation. So the goal of all this is nirvana. This is one of several names, it's often compared to the extinguishing of fire, to the blowing out. There's debate whether it's complete cessation of existence or some kind of transcendental state that the Buddha simply will not speak about. The Buddha's stance is one thing only, that I teach suffering and the cessation of suffering. So it's hard. Some definitions say it's ultimate happiness. Some take Buddhism as being very nihilistic, but most Buddhists will say, no, that's not where we're going. We're not moving towards a nothingness. It's merely the concept that you can't explain it. In one kind of story of it, a Buddha is asked by a disciple, what is nirvana? Explain nirvana. Explain where one goes, what happens, and he extinguishes the candle and says, where does the flame go? Well, you can't answer that question, right? That's not a logical question. It doesn't apply. And the Buddha is trying to say our sense of going somewhere, of transcending, even our terms for transcendence are a term for something that becomes almost meaningless, because we can't, if it's true, we can't really grasp it. And to grasp it is to grasp something that's inexplicable. So that's really at the heart of Buddhism. That's why we started talking about Karen Armstrong's definition with religion. That's why the Buddhist definition leads away from wanting to define a lot of doctrinal concepts and towards practice. This is part of the core nature of Buddhism. When we speak of religious movements or religious discussions and explanations and definitions and doctrines, there are two predominant approaches, and this is within any religion. We'll see these approaches within Christianity, within Islam, within Hinduism, but you can see them both in Buddhism, but I would argue that Buddhism is more apophatic. And what does that mean? An apophatic approach is an approach to the ultimate through negation. It's not that, it's not that, it's not that. Cataphatic is an approach to the ultimate through comparison and definition. So God is like Father. God is like husband. God is like the Son. God. So these comparisons, these images, that's cataphatic. When we say God is eternal, God is immutable, God is unchanging, these are in some sense on the line between apophatic and cataphatic. But apophatic, a direct apophatic, is saying that is God is not that, God is not that, God is not that. Christianity can move towards the cataphatic, but in Jesus, towards the apophatic, but tends to be more cataphatic. So Jesus in one point says, no one is good but God. That's kind of on that line between the apophatic and cataphatic, because it's calling God good, but it's also saying if you would call God good, then there's nothing in this world that you could call good. So if good is a word for God, then it is a word for nothing else. So Buddhism tends towards that apophatic. It's about negation. You will find some Buddhist texts and teachings that are more, nirvana is happiness. That's a cataphatic statement. But most Buddhist statements about the goal and the meaning behind the religion tend towards the apophatic, the path of negation. So keep that in mind.